Welcome to Torah Smash, the podcast for nerdy Jews, where our lives of Jewish learning collide with our love of nerd culture. I'm Ethan Lane Miller, and joining me today are
Barak Malkin,
RDY.
In each episode, we discuss what we lovingly call a Torah smash, which we have defined as a beautiful collision of one thing from the world of Judaism with another from nerd culture. So for today's episode, we're going to be exploring Mishneh Torah, Hilchot, Teshuvah. How'd I do, RDY?
Great. I love Maimonides.
Off to a good start. We're going to be doing chapter 5, verses 1, 2, and 3 in the laws of repentance. And I'll read the first verse. This is from Sepharia. And the typical preview I want to start with is the language is gendered, and I will try my best to make it as gender neutral as possible. So when I slip up, I apologize. Mm-hmm. So verse 1, every person was endowed with a free will. If that person desires to bend themselves toward the good path and to be just, it is within the power of their hand to reach out for it. And if that person desires to bend themselves to a bad path and to be wicked, it is within the power of their hand to reach out for it. This is known from what it is written in the Torah, saying, behold, the man is become as one of us to know good and evil. That is as if saying, behold, this species, humanity, stands alone in the world, and there is no other kind like him, as regards this subject of being able of his own accord, by his reason and thought, to know the good and the evil, and to do whatever his inclination dictates him, with none to stay his hand from either doing good or evil. And, being that he is so, lest he put forth his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat and live forever.
Is this the Borg?
Oh, interesting guess. It is not the Borg.
Wait, can we get a direction? Like, we've got all of nerd culture we're guessing from right now. We're doing movies, we're doing comics. What are we doing?
It is a medium of nerd culture we have not explored yet.
That doesn't help.
It helps a lot.
So
we've done... Is it books? We haven't done books.
It's not books, but you're moving.
Oh, we technically did books with Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, it's not books.
It's not books. It's not comics. It's not movies.
Right.
Correct.
It's not TV shows.
Correct.
We did music.
Is it games?
It is games.
Oh, games. Okay.
We did music. We did Weird Al.
Yeah, I know. I said we did music. So if it's games, and this topic is, it seems to be topic of choice which is like, so it can't be a game of random. So we're not talking Twister.
Correct.
that falls in nerd culture. Ugh. We're not doing like D&D because that's all dice thing, I would think.
But D&D is close.
It's about choice. It's about role-playing games are about choosing the path.
Is it a role-playing game?
It is about role-playing games. Specifically.
Oh, yeah.
Yay! I'm so excited.
Yeah, specifically, I want to explore some video games which use... Yeah. Oh, and RDY just pulled up I believe that was a Dungeon Master book. Was that right?
Yeah, it was I pulled up the book that is the campaign I'm running right now for my.
Oh, that's fine. Wait, before you reveal, so it's an RPG video game. Or is it a specific one? Like, can we try to guess the specific RPG?
There's one in particular I want to focus on, but there are like a couple. Like I'm going to talk a little bit about my RPG experience.
Be ecstatic if you're doing Zelda.
I was going to guess Zelda also.
Oh, I'm not doing Zelda.
Oh, well, then I'm not as ecstatic.
Is it like, what's its genre? Is it like
Fable,
horror RPG, or fantasy RPG?
The hint I'd give is it involves the RPGs that I'm talking about. The ones that I've enjoyed have elements of morality to them.
Okay. How that affects
like
what was the game?
Leisure Suit Larry.
Right. There's a game where if you do bad things, your points go down. There
are lots of games like.
Right, like
Wait, are you talking about like Untitled Goose Game where you go off and be a menace?
No, I'm not.
Or Flux?
No. All right, I give.
Is it like EverQuest?
No, I am excited to explore the genre of role-playing games and specifically spend a little bit of time talking about the Mass Effect trilogy of video games.
I've never played them.
You've got me at a loss too. Looks like you are going to be the expert galore on this episode.
So we're going to talk a little bit about morality and choice, and as that choice is presented or not presented in role-playing games. So my experience with role-playing games starts with really what is my favorite video game, or at least the one that was my favorite growing up, that came out in 1997, which was Star Wars Dark Forces 2 Jedi Knight, which...
surprise.
Yeah, surprise. It was a Star Wars game. It featured intricate levels, live action cutscenes. And fun fact, because it featured live action cutscenes, this was the first live action bit of Star Wars media that had lightsabers, like animated lightsabers, since Return of the Jedi. So this was even before the prequels were out. So this was kind of a big deal. And I'm going to quote from Wikipedia, the Star Wars wiki. Jedi Knight is noted for the ethical decisions integrated into the gameplay. The main character is a neutral character for most of the game, neither fully light nor dark. Actions against unarmed civilians throughout the game, as well as what force powers a player chooses throughout the game, will sway the main character towards the light or dark sides. Eventually, the character must choose between light and dark, and how he chooses depends on the player's actions throughout the game.
Nice. Yeah, this was what I was talking about. Like when you're in Zelda, you can kick all the chickens you want. It doesn't do anything to your character.
So this was one of my favorite games growing up. Like when I tell you I sunk hours into this game, exploring like every possible inch of levels, I mean hours, and I loved it. And that being said, I found the element of choice to be kind of limiting. Yes, there's a light side and a dark side, but ultimately it just kind of changes what the final cutscene that plays at the end of the game. The gameplay doesn't change too much. There's really not choice beyond what the cutscenes are at the end through the light side or the dark side.
Oh, but it's based on how good or bad you were during the game. That will determine the ending video.
So not even actually. What made this game so interesting is you could actually go through and select. You could be the biggest jerk in the world. You could play this game as the biggest jerk in the world and go all dark side powers. And when you get to the decision point, you can choose light side. You can choose light side, and the game will then kick off all your dark side powers. You have to redistribute them to like light side stuff. So it was a in 97, like it was very big. This was one of the first games that had a morality sort of thing to it. But you know, the actions you made didn't necessarily impact the outcome. And this was also somewhat true for the first role-playing game, the first official role-playing game set in the Star Wars universe, which was Knights of the Old Republic. There was a light side ending and a dark side ending, and you could also your powers would influence things. But ultimately, the game only had two endings, the light side ending and the dark side ending. The company that made Knights of the Old Republic went on to then create Mass Effect. So Mass Effect is a science fiction role-playing game. And the original, as well as the sequel Mass Effect 2, received critical acclaim for story and design. But what I want to talk about a little bit is Mass Effect 3. So
specifically, it won't matter to us.
No, I mean,
I Googled it. I'm Googling it now as you talk.
I've pulled it up too.
Yeah, so there are some of our listeners who are like, I know exactly where Ethan's going with this. Mass Effect 3 was the end of the trilogy. And throughout this whole time, BioWare, the developers, kept saying, you know, every choice matters. Everything you do in your character, named Commander Shepard, every choice Commander Shepard makes is going to impact the ending. And so with these years of build up and all this hype, Mass Effect 3 comes out. And what happens? We basically are limited to 3 endings. And when I tell you gamers got really upset, And it led to these very moral discussions of, you know, were people lied to? What's the drawback of technology? Like, were people misled? So I think there's a meta discussion to have here. But I really want to dive into the genre of role-playing games, and we'll talk about Mass Effect 3. And I want to start by asking, if you have a limited number of choices, is that really free will?
Ooh, good question.
If you have an unlimited number of choices?
If you have a limited number of
okay.
choices, is it free will? And I want to jump back to verse 3 from Mishneh, Torah.
Hilchot Teshuvah.
Thank you. Actually, I think I want to hear your answers, then I want to jump back to the Jewish.
All right. Well, question. Is somebody limiting us to 3, or is 3 the seemingly only number of choices we have?
I mean, in this case, it's an arbitrary number, but if we go with Mass Effect, you really had 3 choices. You could destroy all synthetic, spoiler alerts for a 10-year-old video game. You could destroy all synthetic life in the universe, or in the galaxy, rather. You could control it, or you could synthesize so that there wasn't a difference between organic and synthetic life. And essentially, those were the final 3 choices characters got at the end of Mass Effect 3.
And when you say that's the choice the characters got, does that mean that the gameplay calculated your choices and picked one for you? Or does that mean at the end it went, do you want control, or do you want destroy, or do you want combine?
A little bit more towards the second one. Now, there were choices you made that affected your score, and certain scores unlocked the ability to choose different endings, but it didn't matter if you played in Mass Effect. There wasn't necessarily evil because the character was always heroic, but it was, were they Paragon or Renegade? It didn't matter if you were Paragon or Renegade necessarily. You still got those same, assuming you played the game well and strategically, you still got those exact same 3 choices presented to you.
So just because your choices are limited doesn't mean you're not free to choose whichever one you want. So the lack of the amount of choices that gamers want does not mean it's not free will.
Yeah, what is the the like first computer game where you had to type your actions? You were in like a haunted house. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Like Zork?
No.
You said type your actions. Zork was a text-based video game.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe we'll use Zork. So right when that came out, you have limited responses that are programmed into that. And people are like, wow, look at this. We've got choice. And we are all playing games like Zelda and Mass Effect and BioShock and Fallout, where you're making choices. The endings might not be so different because you're still, ending on the same video. I wonder if the fallout from Mass Effect would have been as big if Mass Effect 3 structure was the first game, and then Mass Effect 2 increased the choices, and then Mass Effect 3 increased the choices again. The fact that they went back down, the world is like, we've lost our choice. Zelda's going to end the same way every time I play it, but I get to choose if I go to Goron Mountain first, or if I go to, explore Hyrule or wherever. So I get like maybe I'm just, living in my box of control of I'm feeling I have choice. And so for me, I feel like I have free will when I'm playing those games, but there's still one ending. I think maybe there's a bit of I don't want to say spoiled aspect of it, but I'm talking in terms of video games. I haven't thought about the real world yet. So I don't know how this applies to life, but in terms of video games, I don't know if this limited 3 means I don't have choice or free will.
I think part of the limitation aspect is how video games are made, because in role-playing games where you're, tabletop, it's the dungeon master telling a story with the players.
Yeah,
whereas
right.
video game, it's the creators who have told a story that the player goes through. And part of the reason that there's more choice on a tabletop is because you can't have an infinite algorithm.
Correct.
So there's it has to be done that way. And, congratulations to the producers of Mass Effect 3, because creating a game that scores you on 3 different ways to end the game is pretty fantastic, I think. But, when I homebrew is when you write a game for players to play that doesn't come from a store. So I homebrewed a game based on a book I read. And my idea was, I'm going to put these characters in a world and they have to get out of the world. They have to find the gate out and, beat what we call the BBEG, the big bad evil guy at the end, and get out of the world, find their way back to home. So in this world, in order to give the world flavor and make it, more realistic, I decided to pick a trade that would be the dominant trade in the world they were in. And that trade, I just decided, because it would be fun and because it matched the book I based it off of, was human trafficking and the slave trade. And so, I was using that. Yeah. Well,
light subjects,
slavery, so I was using it for flavor of the world. I was using it because that's what the book did. And I didn't have any imaginings beyond that. But here's the caveat. I was DMing for a group of rabbis. And so all of these rabbis go, we have to end the slave trade. And the whole story took a left turn. And now that's free will, because I respected their free will choices. And in between sessions, I spent a lot of time going, oh my God, I got to rewrite this. So
that's hysterical.
But that's the beauty of being an in-person role-playing game versus being a video game role-playing game, is that free will is truer when you're in the real world.
I've got two examples. And just for those that were listening, you're not crazy. There's not a dog behind you. That was RDY. So don't think that like you've got a noisy neighbor.
I didn't think it was my cat.
Yeah. So two examples. One, I was thinking about what is a real life example of like limited choice? And the first thing that came to mind was like, what if there was an ice cream store? Right. And so like my kid is 3, and about a year ago, my dad got him this adorable little ice cream cart stand. And there are 4 flavors on this stand. Not once has he come to me and said, this doesn't have mint chocolate chip or birthday cake or whatever other flavor he might have tried from a store. Those 4 choices are limitless for him, seemingly, right? Like that he is okay playing with that space, but he was only given 4, and he can only make whatever combination permutations there are of these, 2 scoops of 4 flavors each. And then I'm just going to throw this out if we're talking about choice-based games. Fantastic computer game is the Stanley Parable. And it's over like 19 endings. And some of them are very quick stories and some of them are very long stories. And I've played through, I want to say I've done at least 15 of them when I did it. I might have done all 19, but I do not remember. But there's 19 and then you've done the whole thing. You can't turn or like they gave you seemingly endless choices based on the way video games are made now, like you're talking about with Mass Effect 3, that seemingly 19 endings, and it changes each time the length of the game, and what you do is like completely that is crazy. And that still, if we're talking about limits, is still not the same. Like that's the same thing as 4 ice cream flavors to me.
Yeah. I love RDY that you opened up the key difference between like a video game RPG or me sitting around a table with my friends doing a tabletop RPG. And the games I've talked about, they're all single player games. So it's not even like a MMO, a massively multiplayer online game. Like it's single player, it's scripted. And it makes me think of when I've done, ventured into tabletopping. One of the first things I did to my best friend, who was the DM, we started out in a bar in outer space. And I was like, great. What's my character watching on the TV? Like, what's up on the TV? And so it led to us. We had to invent the sport of Bitkern.
Uh-huh.
And then I was like, oh yeah. So like, what's the score? He goes, 3-2. And I went, oh my God, that's such a high scoring game. And like, it's a like, there's character and world building that you're able to do.
I want to mathematically challenge this for a second.
Yes.
No.
Here's the thing. 4 is a number, 19 is a number. Technically, infinity is a number. I think that there's
4 is the magic number.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Technically, infinity is also a number. And so what is the difference between infinity choices and 4 choices?
Is 0 a number?
Aside from infinity minus 4. Yeah, 0 is a number. You mean 0 choice. Oh, I see what you did there.
Yeah.
No choice is the same as infinite choices.
Yeah.
That is a good challenge.
My head just exploded.
I'd say 0 is a different qualifier because it's a null. That's a null, right? So I think any positive whole number, oh God, this is a tough. My math side is like, I don't know if I want to argue this anymore.
Does it have to be an integer? Yes, a whole.
No, I don't think it has to be.
That's the end of my math.
I don't think it has to be an integer. For Susan, an integer is a whole number.
Oh man.
So I want to talk. I do have a moment about the converse side of choices. And this is something that we deal with a lot in our day and age, and something that the three of us have discussed quite extensively over the weeks that we've been, working on this project that we call Torah Smash. And that is when you need to make a group of people and you say, I want to do a panel for this event and we only have space for 4 people. And these are the 4 people that I've chosen. And then you get the people who say, hey, you didn't pick any of this type of person. Hey, you didn't pick any of this type of person. And, why is this cis, white, straight male talking about women's issues? And sometimes the answer is, oh my God, you're totally right. I didn't think of it. I'm sorry. And sometimes the answer is because these are the best people for the job. And just because the choices that the game makers make are not the variety that the game players wanted doesn't mean the game makers made the wrong choices.
I agree. I think that it's tough, right? I had a lot of Jewish nerds to choose from for you two.
I'm selfishly glad we made the cut.
Right,
I mean,
but there was a lot of decisions that went into why each of you, as you just said, like, wasn't because you were both reform cis white males. That wasn't my selective criteria. I wasn't looking at those pieces. I had a wide variety of people, but there were a lot of factors in terms of age, location, backgrounds, experiences, nerd topics. Like, that's right.
I mean, I think there's a difference. Like, there's the extreme of, like, I'm thinking of an episode of Veep where Selena Meyer is like conducting a kind of photo op press conference about race relations, and they invite like all the chairs of like African American studies at universities, and they all show up and they're all white. And there's a difference between that and, I think, dare I say, this podcast where dare I say this podcast. Something else that came to mind as we're talking about, where do we see limited choices in life? This is something that I use professionally, and perhaps you two as parents have had experience with this too. One of the things that I use pretty frequently in my day job working with kids is love and logic, and the idea of presenting limited choices to children and saying, we can choose this or we can choose this. Which of this are you going to choose? And
that is a classic lesson from my mother.
My grandmother is famous.
It is not, what do you want for breakfast? It is, do you want eggs or cereal? My
grandma is famous for saying, what flavor small vanilla ice cream cone would you like?
Yeah. And
talk about choice.
I'll say for me, and I love vanilla, so that sounds great to me. I'd say 9 times out of 10 it works. 9 times out of 10 the kids respond. They're like, well, I'll pick this choice. Sometimes they push back a little bit. Every so often one of them just refuses to play the game and is like, I choose choice 0, or I don't like any of those choices, and they push back, and it's like, well, okay, they saw through it. Okay, I tried. It's interesting how frequently it works to be like, not just, well, what are you going to do? It's going to be like, okay, you're standing here crying. We can't do this. We have choice A or choice B. Which choice do you want? Most of the time they make a choice. And I haven't played a game with 19 possible endings yet.
You should play it. The Stanley Parable. If you like computer games, that is a fun one.
Is it on Steam?
I played it a number of years ago. So
okay, great. I'll look that up.
I played it at a friend's house. And he just let me sit there because he enjoyed it.
It's on Linux, Mac OS, Microsoft Windows, Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4 and 5, Xbox
it's on the Switch?
and X.
I hope Stanley Parable 2 is on the Switch. There's a sequel.
I do have a Switch. Okay.
I have an Xbox.
Nice.
We should all play. It's not on the Oculus. It's got to be on the Oculus someday.
That'd be fun.
See, look at how diverse we are. Xbox, Switch, and
well, I don't know if I because from our perspective as parents talking to the children, we're seemingly not giving them a choice, right? That is the whole idea, is that we're going to do this thing that has to happen, right? Either you put your shoes on, or I'm going to put your shoes on. Correct. What is the choice you're making?
And one of the key things about Love and Logic is you present two options that you are perfectly okay with. They need to be two options that you will absolutely follow through on, and you're okay following through on.
Right. Yeah, but then the kid is like, great, I get to make the choice. Like, so on one side, the view is there's no choice, and the other side is I have the choice that I'm making. Right. So I don't know. This seems like another one of those episodes like, no answer, people. Sorry. Keep thinking about it.
Can we do a little Rush tech study?
Yeah. Please. And I've got some more questions in the tube if we want to also.
Do you mean a quick tech
study? I don't mean
do
a quick tech study. I mean the band.
Yes,
the band Rush?
Yes, please.
Yes.
You can choose a ready guide in some celestial voice. If you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. You can choose from phantom fears and kindness that can kill. I will choose a path that's clear. I will choose free will.
Okay, this is perfect because after Mass Effect 3 came out, BioWare, the company that made the games, added on to the ending. Like I think 6 months later, they put out like a Mass Effect extended cut, and they added a fourth choice where you do nothing.
The character just sits there?
No, basically the character says, I refuse to participate in these choices. And that is a valid fourth ending to the game.
If you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Did the people were the people okay with it? Did this go over well?
So I took the perspective of people were being a little out of proportion when they responded to this. I thought it was very generous of BioWare to make their developers crunch even more and like throw something out because gamers were upset.
That's actually as close to live role playing as you can get, is to make a modification based on what the players say.
Right.
Yeah. I think that I think it was fine. They fleshed it out a bit more. And to be fair to some of our listeners who are like, wait, Ethan, there's more to the story. There's definitely more to the story. There were other parts about the ending that didn't necessarily make sense or flow well. But yeah, there was an additional ending that was added to the game where Commander Shepard refuses to participate.
That's so funny. That's very like they complained and like, all right, we'll give you the choice and no choice.
Yeah, actually they did.
That's fantastic. And
I feel like I refuse to make a choice.
That's a great solve. Very creative.
That's the Han Solo choice.
Yeah.
Forget this. I'm out of here.
Yeah. Or I'm gonna pull it in.
Never tell me the choices.
Never tell me the odds. Or Captain Kirk reprogramming the no-win scenario so he could win.
The Kobayashi Maru.
The Kobayashi Maru.
That sounds like a delicious sushi.
The Kobayashi Maru. So I'm going to read part of verse 3, and it goes, and this matter is a great and component part, the very pillar of Torah and its precepts. Even as it is said, see, I have set before thee this day life and good, and death and evil. And it is moreover written, behold, I set before you this day a blessing and curse. This is as if saying the power is in your hand, whether humanity, or a person may be inclined to carry on as if they have a free will to elect either good or evil.
But what Deuteronomy 30:15, one of my favorite verses. And the problem is, like I said in the last episode, they're never labeled good and evil. It's usually good and a little better, bad and a little worse.
So something Mass Effect.
And they're not labeled that either.
Yes. So what Mass Effect does is, whereas like Star Wars is a very clear light side, dark side, in Mass Effect, your character is always a hero. It's a question of what type of hero. And I think the best example is there's a mission in the first game where you get a scenario where you're chasing down a terrorist, and you are presented with the choice of you can continue to chase down the terrorist and capture him, but all the civilian hostages he's taken are going to die. Or you can let him escape to rescue and save all the hostages. It's presented as do you sacrifice the few for the many down the road? What's your choice? And both are presented as a heroic choice, potentially anti-heroic on how you want to look at it. But it's never necessarily that the main character is presented as good or evil. And so the question I want to pose to us here is, do role-playing games, and RDY and Barak, we could extend this into tabletop games where I think there's a little more nuance, but do role-playing games do a good job of presenting morally ambiguous characters?
Oh,
or playing as a morally ambiguous character.
Yeah. I have a friend who loves to do that when not even if we're doing like I've never played Dungeons and Dragons, which is like a huge I really want to.
Yeah, we need to play.
Yeah. But I have a friend, I forget what game it was. The only way that he played that board game was to be against like the actual way that everybody's supposed to play, just to make it more fun and exciting. Is he would do the opposite of what you think you should be doing, because that's his choice. He can make that choice. And
that sounds like a Catan strategy.
Yeah, like it wasn't Settlers, but it was something similar to that, where there is a strategy to be made, and one of the choices is to just like really try to drown everybody else, so to speak, and like just not survive as a whole. Like his point of the game was to be the villain, because you could choose to do that. Nobody plays that way, but he does.
Also, dear listeners, we are fully aware that the name of the game is Catan and that Settlers is not in the title.
Is Barack, was he?
It's not Settlers of Catan?
No, it's just Catan.
Where does that, is that one of those Mandela effects things?
Yeah.
Nice.
I don't know. It's in storage right now because we're doing some renovation, so it usually is like sitting right behind me.
Was your friend playing a villain, or was he playing morally ambiguous?
Morally, he would just, I'd say villain, because morally ambiguous means you like flip back and forth and you're not sure what you're going to do. He knew what he was doing.
I guess my question is, if I'm playing a lawfully good character in a tabletop game, and I make a choice that people maybe wouldn't define as lawfully good, would someone's gut reaction be, oh, that was out of character, what are you doing? Or would it be, oh, you're playing a nuanced human being who sometimes isn't always lawfully good?
It's a really, as someone who DMs, this is a really good question. And I would say that decision to be lawful good comes before the decision to whatever it is that you're doing that's ambiguous. But also when you choose an alignment, and Susan, alignment is whether you are lawful, neutral, or good, and whether you are evil or chaotic or neutral. And so those choices give us a box of 9 different alignments from which to choose. And life is more than 9 types of people. So if you are playing a lawful good character who once in a great while does something that's not lawful good, then I would say a good player will play that character as guilty over that decision for a little while. And whereas I have a player who is a younger player, and he's playing a neutral good character, and he's playing him as if he's chaotic neutral at best. And I have pulled him aside and I've said, this is the character you've built, and the way you're playing is a little different. Should we change your alignment? And so that's when you're telling a story together, players and DM, you have to sometimes outside of the game talk about the way the story is going to be told.
That's great. I love that. It was a leading question, but thank you for following into my lead. I appreciate that. I think the final question I have is, are there morally ambiguous characters in Torah?
Oh, all of them. All the good ones.
No hesitation from the rabbi.
When you say all the good ones, what do you mean by that?
Well, let's look at, who do you consider the most famous character in the Bible? I would say it's Moses, and by your nods, I'll say you agree. So
yes, we nodded.
Moses has anger issues. He murdered someone really early on, and he's a workaholic. And his wife complains. His sister, and kind of his brother as well, complained that he's got this other wife. And then there's, is that complaint because doesn't have enough time for his wife, or are they complaining because she's Cushite and therefore it's a racist thing? But that's another story for another time. The classic thing about Moses' anger is the thing that keeps him out of the promised land.
Yeah.
And it all hinges on one word, because he strikes the rock instead of speaking to it. But if he were to do that once, it could be attributed to several things. It could be attributed to muscle memory, because the last time he was told to strike the rock. So maybe he's doing it because he forgot that this time God said, talk to it. It could be attributed to mourning, because Miriam, his sister, just died. He could be considered not himself. But the word that hinges on him not getting into the promised land is pa'amaim, twice. He strikes the rock twice. The first time we could be forgiven. The second time it's anger. Moses is flawed, and that is also why the Bible is the greatest story ever told, is because everyone in the Bible is not perfect. We don't want to read stories about perfect people. We want to read stories about people who might be better than us, but they make mistakes too, which makes us feel okay-ish about our mistakes.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think that I don't know as much of the Torah and characters that probably RDY does, but the ones that I'm like going through my head thinking about and like stories that we know, I can't think of any that are so just one-dimensional, straightforward characters. I think everybody has some sort of change and growth and tough decisions that they often make the wrong ones, and that's why we're learning about them. But yeah.
And King David, oh my goodness.
Oh yeah. Do you think there are stories from the Torah that would make a very compelling setting or story for a role-playing game?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think there are tons of them, but the ones that would be the best of them are written in a way that's a little boring because they're battle scenes, but they are written as battle logs. We went here and fought these people and this many died. And then we went here and fought another people. So the way to flesh that out and make it more exciting would be to role play it.
Here's what I want. I would do the base of Mount Sinai before we get the commandments and everybody's camped there. And there is not chaos, and whether this is before Moses makes his chieftains or afterwards and there's other people making decisions, but you are going around encountering and interacting with all of this plethora of people on camp with their, trying to manage their family, or they're trying to go through these discussions. And so they're having these arguments or decisions that have to be made. And so it's a bunch of side quests where you go from tent to tent and meet people and learn about them. And then you make decisions on who you want to help and I think that has a wide variety of possibility. Please contact us at torahsmash@gmail.com if you are interested in learning more about this future non-existent game.
I'll give you two. One is the story of Noah, that he's got to get to the ark. He's got to stop all of these people from trying to sabotage him, build the ark, get the animals on, save his family. And then, the BBEG could be Methuselah. I don't know. It could be anyone.
The flood.
The flood itself.
Yeah.
No. And I mean, get any dungeon master knows that there's nothing better than a fight on a boat, because when you're on water, you get to pull out all of the creatures that you never get to play with. So the Noah story would be great for that, but also just like the conquest of the promised land. Maybe especially the Gideon narrative from the book of Judges, which is not really conquest of the promised land, but he's the judge who's the general, and he's got to fight through all of these people with a very limited crew. His party is diminished intentionally to show that he has the power of God behind him.
See, I was thinking like very, I don't know if it's classic, but like just the Exodus from Egypt, like role playing as Moses and like, different dialogues and how to persuade people, leading people. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like you're stuck in that single narrative ending though, because I think has to guide
you might be, point. But maybe when we write it, there's a dark side ending where Moses becomes the next Pharaoh,
right?
Where he doesn't find chieftains and he just stays in charge of, like, he doesn't decide to take the advice of Jethro. And so they get there and this is now his land, this new land at the bottom of a mountain. And he becomes this enraged, angered lord of the people who are in the desert, starving and wanting to go somewhere. And this is the best he can do.
Or he realizes that he's got the rod of infinite power and the Ark of the Covenant at his disposal, and he becomes the BBEG.
Right, right. Himself. Nice. That's fun.
Great way to end.
What portion do you think should become a role-playing game? Let us know in the comments. Ethan, any other pieces to wrap us up?
That was it. Mass Effect 3 is a great study in choice, not just in terms of players, but on a meta level of the people who play games and choice. And thank y'all for playing and for participating in this role-playing session of podcast.
And thank you for now, both of you, giving me 2 video games that I feel like I need to play that I'm going to ignore either my family or the books I'm supposed to be reading.
Depending on how much time you want to spend. If you want to do like the whole quests, like through Mass Effect 1 all the way through 3, all it takes is about 90 hours.
Cool.
That's it? Yeah. But that's not doing any of the side stuff. You're just purely on a storyline at that.
No. That's everything. Like I have done it.
Okay.
Yeah. And the Legendary Edition came out about a year ago. It's all 3 games, all the DLC remastered and everything. So yeah, BioWare has not sponsored this podcast.
But hey, if you work for them, let us know. We'd love to find a way to connect. Great. RDY, were you going to say something?
Nothing intelligent.
Awesome. I wish we had some like closing video game version of our outro music. That'd be super fun. Like some 8-bit version. Some 8-bit version of it. Great. Well, that'll do it for this episode of Torah Smash. Our fiscal sponsor is Jewish Creativity International. Our theme music was created by Sean Fogel. You can check out Sean's bands and studio work at www.thesleepywest.com. This episode is supported in part by MagneticShul. MagneticShul is a tech-free, self-contained toy perfect for prepared parents, Jewish educators, and youth professionals. The colorful sets invite children to play and create their own stories. Each comes with a synagogue background and over 50 magnets of the people and props we encounter while at shul. Through MagneticShul, children are encouraged to play, developing familiarity with the sacred space. Ultimately, MagneticShul is where kids play to pray. To learn more about MagneticShul, visit www.MagneticShul.com or contact its creator directly at justin@MagneticShul.com. We want to hear from you and continue today's nerdy discussion. Go to TorahSmash.com to find where to connect with us online, email us directly, find previous episodes, and more. And in honor of Batman Day that just passed, remember that you either try listening to podcasts or you talk long enough to hear yourself become the host.
I'm sorry about Orion.
I'm gonna hate your dog during editing.